Musique, ma série musique, c'est pareil. Hein. J'ai mis Sira Diarra parce que ça me fait penser à une femme qui est très forte, qui est comme une pierre forte comme la roche. Donc là, nous sommes sur l'épisode 4 de Candace Owens, Becoming Brigitte de John et Jean-Michel Trogneux, épisode 4. Donc si vous êtes ready, je suis ready, c'est parti, on commence. Là, n'oubliez pas de lâcher des coms, de liker, de partager et le must de vous abonner. J'ai mis un petit tableau derrière qui fait penser... oui, qui fait penser à la spiritualité. J'espère que vous allez kiffer. Voilà. Donc, si vous êtes ready to go, voilà. Moi, je lance la vidéo. C'est parti.
Series. So, welcome back to our series, Becoming Brigitte.
Et bon appétit pour ceux qui n'ont pas mangé. Ah, là, si, elle a fait son truc. Voilà.
Okay, so some things to recap. I was so frustrated at the end of the last episode because so many of you had commented, Candace, it's time for you to create a family chart. And we had already created a family chart. We just got so busy that I forgot to show it to you, obviously, on the show. So I completely dropped the ball there. I apologize, of course, when we are doing these sorts of series, like the Kamala series, and now as we look at this Brigitte series, there are so many names that it does become confusing, and it's good to slow it down and be able to visualize who and what exactly it is that we are talking about. So let's kind of go backwards and start there. I am showing you guys now the Emmanuel Macron family chart.
Voilà, donc là, okay. Les gars, elle nous montre le tableau de la famille Macron, mais actuel. Donc actuel, c'est-à-dire... actuel, ça veut dire, voilà, vous avez... donc là, vous avez les parents de Macron, Macron actuel, hein, je ne parle pas bien du vrai Macron, et vous avez les grands-parents de Macron du côté de la maman. Voilà, donc on continue.
These are allegedly, I'm saying allegedly here because I have tons of questions as we get deeper into the story, but his parents, Jean-Michel Macron, then you have Françoise Nogues. Obviously, we spoke a lot last week, particularly about Germaine Nogues, who he refers to affectionately as Manette, right? She's the one that shared this love of pedophile-centric books with her grandson. She is, as we mentioned to you last week, the only family member that he from chart, and then, of course, like I said, his mother, what we
Bonjour, bonjour, abonnez-vous, Sébastien, bonjour, bonjour. Abonnez-vous, là, on décrypte l'épisode 4.
Episode, or a couple of days ago, the episode was that Dr. Françoise Nogues, his mother, when she was first introduced to the world, she was introduced as a pediatrician who helped out in some capacity the Social Security office. And then we had this huge bombshell in the last episode where we learned, just kidding, by Social Security work, we forgot to include the fact that she helps transgendered and intersex people secure new identities. I mean,
genre la mère de Madame Françoise Nogues, Françoise Nogues aide les gens à changer de sexe, genre, ou avoir un statut social.
Major tidbit. I mean, that really, it's explosive. And it's important for you to remember that as we go along, because that means that Macron's immediate family was involved in helping people, okay, who had gender issues, to become someone else. In other words, they were facilitating the issuing of real government IDs, which allowed people to legally shed themselves of their former identities and their true biological sex. We have to wake up to the fact that that is the reality of the world that we live in today. So what is that? What are the implications of that? Let's just pause there. What are the implications of if I decide, okay, I'm Candace Owens, nope, I feel like actually I was born a man, and so I'm going to change my name.
Faire l'opération.
My name to Jean-Michel Trogneux, okay? And then someone comes
Donc là, elle prend bien l'exemple que elle dit qu'apparemment, de ce que j'ai compris, la maman d'Emmanuel Macron, et je pense le papa, je suis pas sûre, surtout la maman, aurait aidé des gens à changer de sexe et surtout, à avoir une identité sociale, comme a fait Brigitte Macron, autrement dit Jean-Michel Trogneux, quoi. C'était vraiment dit.
Like,
abonnez-vous, hein. C'est gratuit.
Can I then sue them for defamation for saying that I'm Candace Owens if I legally changed my name to Jean-Michel?
Et là, Candace Owens, elle se fait passer pour lui, pour changer, enfin, pour bien expliquer ce que veut dire. Jean-Michel Chaud, ce qui deviendra à la base un procès.
keep going throughout this series. It's very important to remember this, that his mother was dealing with this capacity in the Social Security office. I should also add here that thereafter, shockingly, in a very rare interview, his mother gave to a journalist named Gail Chakaloff. She was writing a biography about the Macron couple. Biography was entitled Just the Two of Us. And she spoke with his mother, and his mother said something very strange. She said, and I quote, it's in this book, "For me, Brigitte is not a daughter-in-law." Excuse me? What does that mean? Brigitte is married to your son. She's been married to your son for a very long time. She fell in love with your son when your son was 14 years old. What do you mean, to me, she is not a daughter-in-law? What is the implication of that? What else could she be? What else could the First Lady be to you? So we'll just leave that there. Okay, now let's take a look at Brigitte Macron's family.
Non, avant, tout à l'heure c'était Emmanuel, maintenant c'est Brigitte Macron. Alors Brigitte Trogneux, évidemment. André-Louis Ozière, ok. Laurence, normalement ça va être Laurence Ozière. Laurence Trogneux, Sébastien. Apparemment elle aurait eu 3 enfants. Mais normalement c'est pas ses enfants, ou alors c'est ses enfants. Mais quand elle était un homme, ou alors les enfants gardent le secret, c'est trop bizarre. C'est trop. Ou alors ses enfants ne savaient pas qu'à la base c'était un garçon. C'est possible aussi, elle s'est transformée avant un garçon, elle sortait avec Emmanuel Macron et elle a récupéré André-Louis Ozière. Mais elle lui a dit garde le secret, garde le secret, garde le secret. Il y a trois possibilités, je vous les rappelle. Soit elle a eu ses enfants d'un précédent mariage, ou alors ce précédent mariage était André-Louis Ozière, mais elle aura caché qu'avant c'était un garçon. Voilà, elle a caché avant que c'était un garçon, donc du coup, elle a fait garder le secret au mari, et du coup, le mari ne sait pas où est sa femme. Il ne sait pas où est sa femme, donc du coup, voilà, elle a adopté les enfants et tout. Elle s'est fait passer pour femme. C'est possible, hein? Hi, Eleni Levy.
Brigitte, who allegedly was married for 32 years to this guy, André Louis Ozière, okay? And they allegedly had 3 children.
Et à cette époque-là, Brigitte Macron, il voit de femelle et il voit de mâle. Il voit de femelle. À cette époque, elle avait déjà changé. Alors pourquoi peut-être Jean-Michel Trogneux was bit jealous at him sisters? I don't know that.
Ozière and Tifon Ozière. Now it's important to remember, which we touched upon last episode, that the First Lady just routinely sort of gets things wrong in her interviews, right? Like she gets the date wrong from when her sister, Mary Vaughn, died. She had got the date very wrong from when her alleged niece died. And we're starting to think of this as more of a strategy than anything else. Like it's not just forgetting dates, it's because you're trying to please the public. And
yes, I love that.
That was Tifon, okay, her daughter, getting both the date and the manner of her father's burial wrong in Paris Match magazine, weekly magazine. How is that possible?
A daughter first too. A daughter wrong about information. Elle se trompe sur les informations de... Ah, ok, d'accord. Oh, putain.
About this, we can bring up that chart again.
C'est chaud, hein?
Very weird mystery regarding this André Louis Ozière character.
So, 3 possibilities. So, about Brigitte Macron, I've got a man, she hide identity at André Louis Ozière, and she said him, yes, at the past, I've got a man because I want to hide it, because I want to marry you, I want to adopt this 3 children, okay? Ou alors, voilà, she killed Brigitte Ozière. Or the 3 possibilities, I don't know, André Louis Ozière killed Brigitte Ozière. I don't know.
Cannot emphasize enough. We learn from his first cousin, okay? He had a first cousin named John Louis Ozière, and that's where it got really confusing for some people. There's a first cousin, and that first cousin then described that essentially he had sued the journalists for misidentifying him in the wedding photo, that first cousin then got upset because the Élysée Palace kind of played him into suing her for defamation, pretending they were going to join the suit. But then also Brigitte Macron refused to simply say, bring that picture back up, yeah, that's me in the wedding photo. She refused to do this and just kind of backed out. And so he wasn't happy with this. The Oziers, he was not happy. He felt used by the Élysée Palace. He opens up to a journalist and tells us some really strange things about his cousin's burial, about his cousin's funeral, about his cousin's cremation. Mainly, the strangest thing being that the Élysée Palace was involved, okay? They wanted to see to it that this funeral was executed like a thief in the night. They did not want the public to learn about this, and they saw it over the finish line, and yet despite this, Brigitte Macron did not attend the funeral of her alleged ex-husband of 32 years, the alleged father of her children. We want to make sure he's buried, okay? But we are not going to show up, neither me.
De son mari. Donc, au pire, elle a tué she killed the both. She killed the both. So, Brigitte and Audrey Ozier. Alors, elle a tué les deux.
Or the president are going to show up. And then Stefan is going to just make a massive mistake in Paris match and say, I buried my father on December 24th. And then we learn, no, he was actually cremated on December 28th. And it was a year prior. And this is the photo you use because everything was destroyed. Okay? That's crazy. So yes, remember that we learned that information, not from a conspiracy theorist. We learned this from the cousin, Jean-Louis Ozier, the cousin of Andre, okay? The one who successfully sued Natasha Ray for defamation because she wrongly assumed that it was him, okay? What we do know, and we confirmed last episode, is that this man, we can show you again his obituary photo because no other photos of him exist. From the wedding photo to this, his whole life has been destroyed. What we can tell you is that he did, in fact, exist. They lied about where he worked, what bank he worked at. Again, tons of little lies to send people down rabbit holes so they can make a mistake. But what we can't tell you is what exactly happened to him. We cannot ascertain what happened to him based on the testimony of his first cousin, because it depends on whether or not you believe his partner, the woman who was at his funeral, who claimed that she found tickets to Africa in his pocket, that he had emptied all of his bank accounts. And if you potentially, or you could say or if you believe the journalist from Paris Match, who then wrote that Andre actually spent the last days of his life in a psychiatric ward being guarded by none other than Alexander Benalla. Now, we got to talk about this.
Oui, Benalla.
Okay? Because he's important. He's very important. Because he's come up actually a couple of times, but we should dig into deep of why that particular allegation matters. Because it's interesting that despite the fact that they love to sue people, they never went after that journalist who claimed that Alexander Benalla, the former deputy chief of staff to Emmanuel Macron, was guarding, for whatever reason, a psychiatric ward door of Andre. So we know for a fact that Élysée Palace was involved, at the very least, in his funeral, and this journalist puts that. So I think we should explore that. So we should talk about Alexander Benalla, because that is not a subtle mention from a journalist, okay? We had first mentioned Alexander Benalla in the introductory episode when we told you...
Why Alexander Benalla kept at the past psychiatric room for André-Louis Ozier? Pourquoi il a gardé ça pour André-Louis Ozier? C'est bizarre.
This, I don't know how to describe it, like a syndicate almost of pedophiles. That's these accidental pedophiles that Emmanuel Macron keeps landing himself around, okay? We mentioned Olivier Duhamel. That was the man who was accused by his stepdaughter of having molested her twin brother when he was 13 or 14 years old. She wrote this in a book, and by the way, because the statute of limitations had passed, he was never brought to justice, but he admitted that it was true, that he did, in fact, sexually abuse his teenage son. Well, one of the things that he helped, because he was so close to Emmanuel Macron with, he helped him when he landed himself in hot water over what has come to be known in France as the Benalla affair, meaning Alexander Benalla, the deputy chief of staff, okay? And now, for whatever reason, like I said, we have no idea why this journalist mentioned, but said Alexander Benalla was guarding the psychiatric ward. So I'm going to show you Alexander Benalla again so that you can get him into your mind, despite being extremely young. I want to be clear. He is today only 33 years old. He's got quite a remarkable professional resume, okay? When Emmanuel Macron was running for president, Alexander Benalla was just 25 years old.
Ah putain, ils adorent abuser leurs gamins. They very love to sexual abuse children. I don't know what they had very love to many sexual abuse. I don't know.
Candidate as his security officer. He was the head of his security, okay? Once Emmanuel Macron got elected, he then made Alexander Benalla his deputy chief of staff, okay? Huge position. Could you imagine 25 years old and you're like going into the White House, the Elysee Palace? It was then later discovered that these two had an incredibly close relationship, so close that Emmanuel took him on a ski trip with him and his family. Not as the security, as you're a part of the family on a ski trip. And even closer than that, Emmanuel Macron allowed Alexander Benalla, this 25, 26-year-old kid, essentially, to move into the National Palace of the French Republic, okay? He was living at the Palace of the Alma. That is shocking. He had residency here, okay? So what's going on here? Just imagine you're 26, you're living in a palace, and I don't know, I'm thinking he must have provided some incredible security to the president. He must have done the president some solids, okay? When you dig into his past, you learn that back when Benalla was 23 years old, he had been accused and then subsequently acquitted of violence against a woman, okay? Insofar that she said that she was rendered incapacitated to work. But as I said, he was acquitted, and then he became the head of Emmanuel Macron's security team. Then, when Emmanuel Macron was president, a massive scandal broke, which came to be known, obviously, as the Benalla affair in 2018, when his deputy chief of staff was actually caught on camera, dressed as a police officer, beating protesters in the street of Paris. I'm not kidding, okay? Le Monde, that's like the French New York Times, broke the story. They had footage of him. It was undoubtedly Benalla.
Alors, it was Benalla to get up the dress to fight people at the manifestation at 2018, or it is Benalla, himself. I don't know. C'est Benalla ou c'est pas Benalla?
Impersonating a police officer and beating a young protester in the streets. And then a second video emerged, which was published onto Twitter, which showed Benalla grabbing a female protester by the neck and dragging her away. Actually, I'm going to ask my producer, Skylar, were we able to pull that footage? Okay, great. Let's actually show you some of that footage. This is just to make you guys understand this. What you are looking at is a chief of staff of a president beating up a protester. He's going to come on in there in police uniform. That's him. Look at this. Just totally normal chief of staff stuff, right? That's just what everybody.
Et c'est cette vidéo qu'il a révélée au grand public, hein.
All around the world. It would later be discovered that as people began investigating the story more and more, that 3 police officers provided him with more surveillance footage. Alexander Benalla, they were giving him surveillance footage that had not yet been made available to the public, essentially allowing for him to prepare his defense, which signals to us that, okay, they've got ties with the police officers. Clearly, otherwise, he wouldn't have been given the uniform to wear as he pretended to be a police officer that day. Now, President Macron, at the time of this attack, was in Australia. He seemed incredibly reluctant to let go of his deputy chief or to speak about the matter in any capacity publicly, essentially, which is why I guess he called up his doable friend. What should I do? What do you mean, what should you do? Your chief of staff was just caught beating protesters in the street. Why aren't you just more shocked at that? What do you mean, what do you do? And it seems that Emmanuel Macron might have been so concerned about this that he tried to help Alexander out. Now, why am I making that assumption? Again, this is an assumption, not a fact. But it what is a fact is that Alexander Benalla, when he was being interviewed about the scandal, none other than Mimi Marchand was in the room to assist him, speaking to the press. Mimi Marchand, yes, the Pope, the celebrity popess of the press, who could get anything in the press, anything taken out of the press, woman that could get the press to cover up pedophilia charges for her friends, okay? Eventually, as the scandal completely engulfed the Elysee Palace, they did in fact have to move to dismiss Benalla. On paper, at least. I want to be clear. On paper, he was released, because then another scandal emerged. It would later be discovered that a few months later, they realized they did not actually remove his diplomatic passports. And despite being seemingly fired, several months later, he used those diplomatic passports to travel to meet with African leaders, including the president of Chad, a guy named Idris Deby. Now, for people that are watching this from Africa, you're looking at this guy going, didn't he die a few years later in kind of one of those stereotypical Western scenarios where suddenly a group of
Alors c'est bizarre, Benalla, il va, je sais pas, en fait, il part sans l'état-major battre quelqu'un. Et après, pour pas que trop le chef d'état-major s'inquiète ou sache, il va directement voir Emmanuel Macron. Alors c'est Emmanuel Macron qui le prend sous son aile, c'est trop bizarre. Et après, il doit être viré, il a été viré plusieurs mois après, mais quand le chef de son cabinet a su, et il a pris ses passeports diplomatiques pour aller voir des chefs africains. C'est trop bizarre. Scénario occidentaux stéréotypé, tout à coup, un groupe de rebelles se relève, me donnant une situation de type. On continue.
Give me like a Muammar Gaddafi type situation, and the rebels are just so unhappy and they kill the president. Yeah, that's what happened to that guy in Chad. Yeah. So, but I'm sure it was totally organic and people were really unhappy in the streets and like the West had nothing to do with it. Nonetheless, Alexander Benalla was meeting with this guy on diplomatic passports after he had been fired. So it was a second part of the scandal. It then emerged that while he was working for Macron, Alexander Benalla, this 26-year-old palace-living king, had actually contracted financial ties with two Russian oligarchs who were said to be members of the Russian mafia. Oopsies, again, I guess everyone around me is accused of being either a criminal, a pedophile.
On va passer, hein. On va passer à autre chose. Bizarre, ce truc-là. Bizarre, très très bizarre. Voilà, donc maintenant, elle vient sur un organigramme. Alors, Michel, Mimi Marchand, Emmanuel, Brigitte Macron. Nicolas Tchexker, Bernard, je pense que c'est des gens qui travaillent pour eux. Françoise Nogues et Benalla. Putain. Le couple le plus dégueulasse du début du 21e siècle.
A professor or a teacher seems a little suspect.
Ouais.
Then below her, we have Bernard Arnault, richest man in the world because he controls LVMH. We mentioned his son-in-law, Xavier Niel, who was the in-between, the go-between between Mimi Marchand and the first couple. But I want you to also know that LVMH owns Paris Match. Okay, so that's where she's putting all of these doctored airbrushed. Voilà, c'est bien ce qu'on dit souvent, c'est les francs-maçons possèdent des médias. Donc, s'ils sont déjà dans le sale et qu'ils possèdent des médias, les médias aussi sont dans le sale. Donc, c'est pour ça que les médias vont véhiculer de mauvaises informations. J'essaie de le dire en anglais. If this type of men like Bernard Arnault or like another entities like Jacques Attali or I don't know, Rothschild, I've got some medias of the world like Le Monde, like Times, like Vanity Fair, like Mediapart, like a lot of media, because like this, with like this media, they control the world. It is what some medias is not. I've got a credibility. C'est tout, c'est ce que je voulais ajouter. I would say airbrushed images of Brigitte so that everyone thinks she's like young and looking and irresistibly hot. She's working on that. Then we'll jump up to the right corner there. We mentioned Nicolas Ghesquière. This is the person that's dressing the first lady, also under the LVMH empire, the one who is just putting transgendered people everywhere he can. Honestly, you should just Google Nicolas Ghesquière in your spare time because we didn't even scratch the surface.
Des fois, elle parle un peu vite, la nana, là. C'est mon avis, chacun partage son avis.
Young and looking and irresistibly hot. She's working on that. Then we'll jump up to the right corner there. We mentioned Nicolas Ghesquière. This is the person that's dressing the first lady, also under the LVMH empire, the one who is just putting transgendered people everywhere he can. Honestly, you should just Google Nicolas Ghesquière in your spare time, because we didn't even scratch the surface in terms of how dedicated he is to the trans cause and bringing all these trans models and putting them on the runway and trying to trans everything. But I'm sure Brigitte Macron is exactly who he says he is. And just, I don't know, just wants to dress Brigitte Macron for whatever reason. It is what it is. Then, of course, as we mentioned, Emmanuel Macron's mother, Françoise Nogues, who we know is concerning her work to trying to get individuals who suffer from identity issues new identities, and doing this, by the way, this is legal now, okay?
Ah oui, parce que
And
c'est
then
dans
we
leurs
have
mains, donc
there
c'est
on
légal.
the bottom, who we just discussed, was Alexandra Benalla.
Banala,
So
alors,
just
suffit de...
piece all that together, okay? With forgery, extortion, and most importantly, with access to a woman who can facilitate the changing of identities, it is not enough for any person investigating this case to ask questions like, is this Brigitte Trogneux in the wedding photo? You will notice we didn't ask that question when my legal team got involved. We didn't say, is this Brigitte Trogneux in the wedding photo? We had to instead ask something more specific. Is this the current First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, pictured here?
No, it is Brigitte Osier. It is not Brigitte Macron. It is Brigitte Osier. And at the left, Brigitte, there was Brigitte Osier, Herdut, and at the right, Brigitte Osier Young. It is as understand. Brigitte Osier à gauche, Brigitte Osier jeune, d'après ce que j'ai compris. Hein.
Okay? And that's when the couple gets real quiet. They don't want to answer those questions. You guys get what I'm getting at here, okay? Because we can confirm that that is indeed a photo of a woman named Brigitte Trogneux in that wedding photo. Where that Brigitte is, we cannot confirm, because the First Lady refuses to answer. She has a mother-in-law who helps transgender people get new identities. So you have to essentially understand that you can just take somebody's name. You can become somebody else at a moment's notice. Now, legally, when you become transgender, okay?
Donc elle va assumer que quand elle était adulte, oui, mais pas quand elle était mariée. She accept that when she was already married, but no, before she was young. It's very weird. It's very weird. C'est trop bizarre.
To Jean-Michel Trogneux. Okay, we obviously have to discuss him. This is Brigitte Trogneux's brother. Today is his birthday. Happy birthday, Jean-Michel Trogneux. It's really important that we learn about him, a guy who was so close to his sister, two different people, his sister, Brigitte Trogneux, that she made him the best man at her wedding. But then he just was completely missing from mention when the first lady, Brigitte Macron, came into power. Seemed to be purposeful to allow this person to fall through the cracks, despite all of the stuff being written about her family and where she came from. There's no mention of Jean-Michel Trogneux. That was the dog that was not barking. We're going to talk about him. We're going to allow that dog to bark. But first, I'm going to take a quick break here to remind you about some of our amazing sponsors. First and foremost, today's episode.
Alors là, elle parle de sponsor. Allez, on zappe. Allez, c'est reparti.
But the English-speaking world did not understand what was happening. And there are a lot of questions even in the French-speaking world. They don't understand why it is that...
Et puis elle le disait au début, enfin oui, Candace Owens, oui, comment les Français n'ont pas pu voir, bah on n'a pas pu voir, c'est tout. On continue.
Broussard has not been sued for defamation, but Natasha Ray has. What is the difference? Xavier Broussard was always very clear with me that his major breakthrough came thanks to the work of Natasha Ray. She came to him and first said, like, this is Jean-Michel Trogneux. I've been working on this. So where did she fumble the ball and where did he not fumble the ball? And this is where it gets really interesting, and it was why it was so important for me to slow that down for you, that we are talking about two different individuals, Jean-Michel Trogneux and his sister Brigitte Trogneux. What you should know about Jean-Michel Trogneux was that he was born on February 11th, 1945. And regarding his existence, there can be no question. In fact, it is a stark contrast to trying to look into Brigitte Trogneux. Unlike his sister, Brigitte Trogneux who, like her husband, appears to have nearly every trace of her existence magically wiped, destroyed. You cannot get your
Waouh.
hands on
Donc
documents.
Jean-Michel Trogneux aurait effacé tout ce qui était de son existence, ou de lui, ou de Brigitte Osière. Non, Brigitte Osière, quoi qu'il reste la photo. But Jean-Michel Trogneux have got to erase all the proof of him existence. I don't know.
Brigitte Trogneux, person who's claiming to be in the Elysee Palace as Brigitte Macron, you think it'd be very easy to get school pictures of her. You can't get them. Xavier Poussard has gone through court processes in order to get his hands on a yearbook that should be supplied by law, okay? She went to Sacred Heart, Sacre Croix. I hope I'm saying that okay in French. Sacre Croix. And they're supposed to give you the yearbook so you can look at a picture. Despite this, the school is refusing to do that. Now, why would a school refuse to give you a photo?
On ne peut pas donner la photo de la première dame quand elle était gamine. Ils ont été soudoyés. Why they not accept to give the photos of Brigitte Macron? I don't know. The school of Brigitte Macron when she was young, because it's not her. It is Brigitte Trogneux.
First lady. Of the first lady growing up. Why can't we see pictures of her in yearbooks that are in existence? Why can't we see her in elementary school, middle school, and high school? Why is it that every trace of Brigitte Trogneux's existence is impossible to garner? And it was also difficult, but not impossible to garner, stuff about Jean-Michel Trogneux. And we were able to piece together a very clear timeline of his existence until he kind of magically falls off of a cliff. So we will walk you through this timeline, okay? Jean-Michel, as I told you, born in 1945. We then know that he begins attending a Jesuit academy. We have multiple photos of him at a Jesuit academy. And I'm going to show you one of them, I believe, that we have here. Yep, so if you look there on the far right bottom, you will see that that is Jean-Michel Trogneux. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to save some of the photos that we have because Xavier Poussard is going to be our next episode, that interview, and what he worked to get his hands on is explosive, and I do not want to ruin that for him.
C'est peut-être lui, Jean-Michel Trogneux.
It's our timeline. In 1953, his little sister, Brigitte Trogneux, was born. Then we know, like I said, he continued to attend that Jesuit academy. Then we have that famous 1944 family picture.
Attendez, je recule un petit peu. Hein.
Documentary maker who felt like
I'm back
again. In 1953,
Sa petite est née alors. Ah oui, ok.
Then we know, like I said, he continued to attend that Jesuit academy. Then we have that famous 1944 family picture, which Best Image released to the documentary maker who felt like she was, for whatever reason, being questioned by the Elysee.
Yes, ça va live.
Like she was.
On fait des lives nous aussi, hein, ça va?
She was able to get her hands on that family picture. 1955 to 1956.
Donc là, ce qu'elle essaie de dire, c'est que bon, là, elle raconte le parcours de Jean-Michel Trogneux, et donc 7 ans après, Brigitte Trogneux est née, et après bon, là, elle vous raconte la suite, voilà. Mais donc, on vous raconte la suite. De toute façon, il y a la traduction en dessous. Oui, merci. J'essaie aussi d'expliquer en anglais parce que je vois des Anglais et des Russes qui me rejoignent dans les lives. Donc, j'ai vu, toi aussi, t'as fait gagner pas mal d'abonnés. Donc, on essaie d'attirer beaucoup de monde et de leur apporter de la vérité, quoi. De ce qui se passe en vrai, quoi. Parce que, voilà, c'est pas normal ce qui se passe, quoi. Merci beaucoup.
And we will have those class photos available for you in Xavier's interview in our sit down, which will be.
Et donc, at the moment, she said you that the school that Brigitte Trogneux was young, the school don't want to give us some photos. Why? I don't know. Si t'es dispo, j'attends ton avis pour ce soir. Oui, c'est gentil, merci, j'y penserai. Pour l'épilogue, tu me diras. Oh putain, c'est qui est mort encore? C'est qui est mort encore? D'accord.
1955 to 1956, he's back at school. Again, we will have those class photos available for you in Xavier's interview in our sit down, which we'll be releasing next. In 1960, Brigitte and Jean-Michel Trogneux's sister, Mary von Trogneux, dies in a car accident with her husband, Paul Farcy.
Oh putain, une de ses filles qui meurt dans un accident de voiture. Son mari, Paul Farcy, en février. Oh là là. Leur fille...
On February 24th,
non, Paul Farcy.
Their daughter, Natalie, 5 months old at the time, survives and goes on to marry a guy named Richard, and they have 2 daughters. In 1963, the public...
Donc c'est peut-être la Brigitte Osière qui ils ont dit qu'il mourrait dans un accident de voiture. Merci beaucoup. Ouais, j'essaierai de me connecter ce soir. Merci beaucoup. Donc elle raconte, je pense que c'était Brigitte Osière qu'ils ont dit qu'elle était morte dans un accident de voiture. Mais je sais pas, ils disent Paul. Donc j'ai envie de reculer encore et savoir. C'est trop bizarre. Qui est mort dans un accident de voiture? Moi, je veux comprendre. Donc on revient à la photo de classe.
Here.
Merci beaucoup.
Yep. So if you look there on the far right bottom,
je vais en faire d'autres de live.
That is Jean-Michel Trogneux. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to save some of the photos that we have.
Voilà, donc j'avais dit que c'était lui. Hein. Il semble que c'était lui, si j'ai bien reconnu.
And what he worked to get his hands on is explosive, and I do not want to ruin that for him. Jumping back into our timeline, in 1953, his little sister, Brigitte Trogneux, was born. Then we know, like I said, he continued to attend that Jesuit academy. Then we have that famous 1944 family picture, which Best Image released to the documentary maker, who felt like she was, for whatever reason, being questioned by the Élysée Palace, that were treating her like she was under interrogation. She was able to get her hands on that family picture. 1955 to 1956, he's back at school. Again, we will have those class photos available for you in Xavier's interview in our sit-down, which we'll be releasing next. In 1960, Brigitte and Jean-Michel Trogneux's sister, Mary von Trogneux, dies in a car accident with her husband, Paul Farcy.
Voilà, donc c'est bien Brigitte. Tout à droite, il me semble. Oui, tout à droite sur en bas. En bas, moi je pense que c'est en bas, parce qu'en haut, je pense pas, mais en bas, après je peux peut-être me tromper. Donc, after Candace Oran, she say that Brigitte Trogneux died in a car crash accident, with her husband Paul Farcy. Non, c'est un faux, je vois pas bien. Toi, t'es jeune, t'as meilleure vue. Ah oui. Ouais, attends, je vais approcher le truc parce que c'est avec mon ordi. Mais en fait, si tu veux, elle montre le truc de Jean-Michel Trogneux, tu sais, sa chronologie. Donc là, elle dit genre, il est mort dans un accident de voiture de Paul Farcy. Mais ça, c'est une histoire inventée. It is the story events. Story fabrication. It's a fabrication story. That was Brigitte Trogneux died in a car crash with her husband Paul Farcy. 24 février, leur fille.
Their daughter,
ne veut pas montrer de photo.
5 months old at the time, survives and goes on to marry a guy named Richard, and they have 2 daughters. In 1963, the public is then given a photo of what we are told is the real Brigitte Trogneux at communion. We note that this does not look like the current First Lady, and the current First Lady has thus far, to this day, declined to answer my question.
Tu vois, bah là, c'est quand même complexe. Hein. C'est très, très complexe, cette histoire. Hein. Des fois, on a du mal à suivre. Hein. C'est complexe. C'est un truc de...
Not if it's Brigitte Trogneux in the photo, but whether or not it's her in the photo. Important differentiation. In 1963, Jean-Michel Trogneux lived in Algeria, in February. So he was 18
voilà.
years
Donc là, c'était sa sœur qui était morte dans un accident de voiture avec Paul Farcy. Et puis, ils ont perdu leur fille de 5 mois. Et Jean-Michel Trogneux, pendant ce temps-là, il fait son service militaire en Algérie.
C'est complexe, hein? This was just after the bloody war of independence, Algeria getting their independence from France. And he says at this time, no Frenchmen went to Algeria unless they were communists. But we know that he was there because there is a census available. And we are keen suddenly to get a photo of him around this time because, well, now we're not talking about kid photos, which seems to be the only thing Brigitte Macron wants to release. A very small amount, a total of 3 photos that were released. Doesn't want to release any older photos until suddenly Brigitte Macron is a professor, right? Brigitte Osière says, oh, I'm a professor. We're just kind of like missing these important years of her life, which would allow
donc déjà, c'est pas normal que Brigitte Trogneux meurt pendant que Jean-Michel Trogneux soit en Algérie, fait son service militaire. Et quand il a appris qu'elle était morte, est-ce que c'est pas lui qui a commandité l'expérience? It is not him. Is that not him that to commander the accident? because she was in Algeria. She was in Algeria. Donc, je sais pas. They paid something, a man or some people killed Brigitte Osier. I don't know.
The face sort of mutate over time, right? This next photo, which I'm not going to show you because it is explosive and it took Xavier Poussard years to get. He gets his hands on a photo of Jean-Michel Trogneux, who is enrolled in the ESTP school, which is a French engineering school. That becomes the last verified photo that we have on record. But I want you to note he is 18 at this time. You take any person, you take a photo of them when they're 18, and it is very hard to say that you were expecting this person to look majorly different, right? Decades on from that, because you are a young adult, right? Jumping back into this timeline, we then know that the real Brigitte Trogneux marries André Louis Osier, becoming Brigitte Osier. We have a wedding announcement, we have a wedding photo. It actually happened, and that is the photo which Natasha Ray made an unfortunate and totally understandable mistake regarding. And then, like I told you, for whatever reason, Jean-Michel photographically disappears. He disappears. And then this amazing thing happens. In 1977, when people started recognizing that their first lady, something about this story didn't make sense. When people began first speaking about their suspicions that they were looking at a transitioned man, for many reasons, they were able to dig up an interview.
C'est moi ou c'est toi qui chocolat banane? Oh, attention, hein?
And it's a man who says that he is transitioned and living as a woman named Véronique. Now, for my English listeners, this is going to be a bit confusing for you, so I'm going to describe to you why this
is bon,
so
chocolat et la banane, oui. Ça va?
Every person that speaks, you can transition your name, you can try to speak in a different tone, but you have tics, you know, almost things that you say that you don't even recognize that you say, words that you might rely on. And for First Lady Macron, that tic, so to speak, is she says, that is to say, right? That is to say. Some people might say, like. You know, like, I was going to, like, the store, and, like, her tic is, that is to say. That is to say.
Très bien, merci.
So
Bienvenue.
we have this individual who appears, does not show their face, it's shadowed on this talk show in 1977, says their name is Véronique, and says that they have transitioned, and the person has
la femme
the
qui a le
exact
chapeau, peut-être, je
same
sais pas.
voice as the current First Lady of France.
Non, c'est Brigitte
And
Trogneux.
the same tic. And of course, at the time that the First Lady was doing all these interviews, she never thought the
La fausse Brigitte Trogneux.
This old
Très bien,
interview
merci.
of this transgender individual on a talk show.
Donc en fait, ce qu'elle essaie d'expliquer, c'est que Brigitte Osier qui est morte, Jean-Michel Trogneux se fait passer pour Brigitte, et voilà, elle a apparu dans un talk show en disant que
that is to say, over and over again. So I'm going to play a little bit of this interview. Of course, it is in French, so this will mean nothing to English listeners, but then I'm going to read you the transcripts because there's some other important coincidences that happened. Take a listen.
Je crois qu'en fait, il n'y a pas de transformation parce que le psychisme est déjà fini.
Ah putain, Valmont, tu vois ce que je vois? C'est en fait, comme Brigitte Osier est morte, mais ce qui n'a pas à son âme, donc Jean-Michel Trogneux était en train de se transformer. Donc c'était bien Jean-Michel Trogneux qui était en interview. Oui, mais c'est un truc de malade. Déjà, Candace Owens l'a repris, Xavier Poussard a bossé dessus, mais c'est un truc de malade. Pourquoi Jean-Michel Trogneux, il sort d'Algérie, il va faire une interview après la mort de sa sœur en 1977, il se transforme en Brigitte Macron?
L'individu, en l'occurrence moi, est déjà préparé à ce genre de mutation par nécessité, en ce sens qu'on se sent femme et on régularise une situation sans plus. Il n'y a pas mutation, il y a régularisation.
Vous êtes devenue complètement femme, donc vous avez été opérée il y a combien de temps?
J'aime pas tellement le mot devenir complètement femme. Oui. C'est-à-dire que nous devenons une sorte de femme pouvant copuler, mais ne pouvant pas procréer.
Oui.
De là des problèmes juridiques d'ailleurs, dont on parlera après. C'est-à-dire que l'intégration se fait sans problème sur le plan individuel, il n'existe que sur le plan social.
Now, essentially, someone in the chat here just said, that's her voice, but also someone who said in the chat that this, you could refer to this as a voice footprint. That's a perfect way to say it. It's a voice footprint. There are things that you just can't rid yourself of. But also, even when you transform your identity, you still have an identity. You still have interests that don't magically go away. If you change your name, okay, this is why I'm going to tell you what she says in the script. If I'm Candace Owens, even if I change my name to Jean-Michel Trogneux, it doesn't transform my interest. It doesn't make me, I love Italian food. I'm not going to suddenly like not like Italian food because I could become Jean-Michel Trogneux. I'm not going to suddenly not be interested in the Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds case because I changed my name legally to Jean-Michel Trogneux. And so this interview was explosive when it was released because of things that Véronique said. So I'm going to pull up the transcript for you in English and read you.
Là, elle va traduire en anglais, mais nous, on a déjà compris. Hein.
So the interviewer asks, he says to the audience, I can only guarantee...
Voilà, donc là, c'est l'interview. Ouais, c'est l'interview déjà en anglais. C'est un truc de ouf, excusez-moi. Ça me dépasse, hein. C'est la famille des Power Rangers. Ouais, c'est... En fait, elle se transforme et elle va donner une interview comme quoi... ça se voit qu'il travaille pour la franc-maçonnerie. Puis pourquoi il va donner une interview pour, je sais pas, promouvoir la transgérité, je sais pas, promouvoir le transgenre. Ça me dépasse, cette histoire. C'est un truc de malade. Témoignage de Véronique. J'aimerais savoir si lorsque vous avez subi...
Véronique, I'd like to know if when you had this operation, which is the one you've had, it was a difficult moment.
Non, en fait, elle a déjà transformé l'interview déjà en anglais déjà. C'était un moment difficile pour vous ou est-ce que je suis juste le culminant de quelque chose?
Of something that had happened before. Oh, Véronique says, I don't think there's any transformation because the psyche is already feminine and the individual, in this case me, is already prepared for this kind of mutation out of necessity. In the sense that we feel like women and we merely normalize a situation. There's no transfer, there's normalization. The interviewer says, so you're completely a woman? How long ago did you have the operation? Interestingly enough, she doesn't answer that part of the question of when she had an operation, but she goes on and she answers, I don't really like the words completely a woman. In other words, we become a kind of woman who can copulate but cannot procreate. Hence the legal problems we'll be talking about later. In other words, integration goes smoothly on an individual level. They only exist on a social level. Okay, so already she's starting to speak about this trouble that we know that Emmanuel Macron's mother is going to concern herself with, which is like, okay, there are these legal problems with who we identify with and who we know we're women, okay, but we have these legal hoops and barriers, and this is why I'm breaking and telling my story because we have to change this. We have to be able to change this. The interviewer says,
et puis Valmont, je sais pas si tu as suivi, tu as aussi la mère d'Emmanuel Macron qui a aidé Jean-Michel Trogneux évidemment à changer de sexe, mais surtout avoir pas que changer de sexe, mais avoir une identité sociale. C'est un truc de malade. Quand c'est vrai, parce que la personne, elle se supportait pas à garçon, elle se transforme en fille pour qu'elle s'en sorte, ouais. Mais pour détourner, pour mentir et pour montrer aux gens que tu es une femme, c'est trop bizarre. Ou pour promouvoir les trucs de la franc-maçonnerie, je sais pas.
Job that's about the public. Véronique responds, that's right, I'm a craftsman. I have regular contact with the public. I'm in close contact with customers. I don't have any problems. I used to because I had a phenotypic gender, meaning an ambiguous appearance. They took me for what I wasn't, a homosexual, which wasn't the case, either in my behavior or in my way of thinking. But unfortunately, this image resulted in non-integration. This is partially cut off here for me, but it says non-integration. And actually, I normalized a situation for my integration, and I live very legally and honorably. For civil status purposes, it is possible to change your first name to an ambiguous one. This is very important because it enables integration or pseudo-integration into society.
J'ai suivi un peu, oui, la copine là-bas nous fait des résumés. Ouais, là, je pense qu'elle a fini, elle, mais je veux dire, il me reste 3 vidéos encore, 3-4 vidéos même. Mais je veux dire, c'est un truc de ouf. Ouais.
In the sense that there are always problems, but they can be solved administratively by mutual agreement. But legally, there's no solution. Unlike all foreign legislation except the Belgian legislation, which is modeled on ours. The interviewer then asks, do you feel that you are now completely yourself and you don't have any problems identifying yourself since your operation? Véronique says, to tell the truth, I only had identification problems towards others, not with myself. I saw myself as what I was, a woman with a body that didn't belong to her. It's very difficult to conceive for someone who's comfortable in one's own skin. I use the term comfortable in one's own skin because it's the typical image, because I didn't have any problems, but people created problems. Now I don't have any problems. To tell the truth, this operation, that is the removal of this useless organ in our case, because it is both unusable and unused. And the interviewer asks her, do you live alone? Véronique says, I'm not with anyone, but I've lived with a woman and conceived this union in the style of George Sand and Chopin. Chopin was probably a transsexual. His style of melody, the way he plays, makes this quite clear. I think the image that has been given of the...
Donc là, il dit clairement, t'as compris, Malvon, là, il dit clairement que, non, voilà, en fait, on va, parce qu'il dit pas vraiment qu'il a vécu avec une femme, il a vécu avec un homme, mais il voulait concevoir l'union comme Georges Sand et Chopin. Donc en fait, c'était son rêve, en fait. Il voulait sortir avec un homme et il voulait faire Georges Sand et Chopin. En fait, c'est ça qu'il voulait faire. Il voulait faire ça. Donc c'est pour ça qu'il a tué sa sœur.
Maud Verlaine union is a distorted, caricatured image that doesn't correspond at all. This is very important, okay? She has this speech tic. It's exactly like Brigitte Macron's. If you spoke French, you would understand that. But she also mentioned musical composer Frédéric Chopin, plus mentioned gay poets Paul Verlaine and Arthur Rimbaud. Now, why is that significant? Okay, well, these poets, they were in a homosexual affair, you know, but violence, very violent.
Donc, il a imité les musiciens de l'époque qui étaient transsexuels. C'est ça qu'elle entend dire.
So she's clearly coming across as someone who is tremendously educated. This is not some random person, right? This is somebody who has been educated in the classics, who is on this show for the purpose of trying to move along legislation to be able to make it easier for people who are trans to secure identities. That is the purpose of this.
Je viendrai chez vous pour voir la fin. Je m'abonne. Oui, c'est gentil, c'est gentil. Là, c'est l'épisode 4, donc il me reste la 5, la 6, l'épilogue. Donc oui, je ferai un live très très bientôt. Mais c'est très choquant. Donc en fait là, she tried to say, Jean-Michel Trogneux was in the television at the past in 1977, and he had got interviews about the talk show and the men of the show, the president of the show, and he said to him, yes, I want to be like some musicians at the start of the 20th centuries. I want a couple like Chopin and George Sand. It's a very, very short.
Right? And as I said, the purpose of
and
using
that the finality of this idea is to propose the idea to the transgender people get a man or woman, a man to have got identity with the man at the public. The new culture for the transgender with the man. C'est un truc de ouf. And Candace Owen explained at the past some musicians of the classes have got oui, Chopin c'est beau. I've got some relationship with homosexual, or they was homosexual. C'est trop chaud, c'est trop chaud ce truc-là. Heureusement que d'écouter Chopin ne pousse pas tout le monde à la transformation. Oui. Merci pour l'abonnement.
This ability to communicate and speak about the high arts is to make people, perhaps the audience, is more sympathetic with the cause, right? She's saying I was always a woman, which is funny because as I read that, I also, what's ringing in my head is that sentence that Brigitte and Emmanuel wrote to me in the first legal letter. They said, she does not owe you any proof that she has and always will be a woman. Like, very strange thing to write. Almost like, I believe it and therefore it is. And of course you do owe me proof. If you're going to say that you're going to sue me in a Tennessee court, you absolutely will be owing me proof if you're going to say that I defamed you. But going back to the mention, these classical mentions, regarding Chopin, The first couple, when they were creating their legend in the public, claimed that they had moved a piano into the Élysée Palace because Emmanuel Macron, remember the virtuoso, loved to play Chopin for Brigitte and for Brigitte only. So this is something that this matters to the couple, okay? Regarding the homosexual poets that she mentioned, Paul Verlaine and Rimbaud, Emmanuel Macron, while acting as president, considered admitting them both into the pantheon, which is it's where they bury all of these French heroes, okay? And this sparked a massive debate. Like, should these people, first off, one of the lovers shot
Mais
the
après,
other
Valmont,
one.
tu sais, il y a une différence entre la musique et tu sais, le fait de ça, c'est une orientation sexuelle, quoi. Mais le mec, il est venu. Ce qui me choque, en fait, c'est le mec. Elle a attendu la mort de sa copine pour venir d'Algérie, puis il avait un complexe, elle dit tiens, bah, comme elle est morte, j'en profitais, comme ça, comme elle était amoureuse d'Emmanuel Macron, voilà, je vais prendre sa place, je vais changer mon sexe et puis je vais me mettre avec lui. Donc, je sais pas comment il a poussé Emmanuel Macron à avoir des relations sexuelles avec lui en tant qu'homme, quoi. Ou alors Emmanuel Macron aime les hommes. C'est trop bizarre et en même temps très malsain à la fois.
Time in prison, would this be a good thing to move them? Who's going to honor them as this like homosexual these homosexual poets and greats by burying them in this significant structure. But what ended up happening was Rimbaud's family firmly rejected that honor because they did not want his legacy to be reduced to a gay icon. So that's just incredibly fascinating, right? It's incredibly fascinating that you have this person, Véronique, and she's saying and mentioning all the people that we know have this significance in their relationship between Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte. And she has, after somebody used an AI voice analysis, they said that this was 100% the same person. And, you know, I don't know much about these softwares, but for somebody...
On restera dans le flou sur cette histoire pendant longtemps encore. Il faudra un travail d'historien pour démêler tout ça. Oui, après... Mais déjà, on a pas mal de choses. Donc, Xavier Poussard qui a sorti pas mal de choses et qui travaille avec Candace Owens. Oui, après, ça va marquer l'histoire. C'est clair que ça va marquer le règne de la France. Déjà, Emmanuel Macron qui perd ses terres en Afrique, ses collaborations. En plus ça, de ce qu'il y a dans son couple, la France, elle se casse la gueule.
Come out and to declare that this is 100% the same person, and the only difference is that the voice has aged to have the same tics. It's a lot of coincidences. It was major when this happened and when this was revealed. And then there are some more interesting things to remember here, okay? When you jump back into the timeline, so Véronique appears, we don't know what this person's name is in life. They're using this name for this interview, Véronique, no last name, we don't know anything else. But
et puis Véronique à la télé talk show et plus tard Brigitte Macron. C'est bizarre. Parce que peut-être au départ, il voulait pas prendre l'identité de sa sœur. Donc, at first time, the men don't want to take the identity of Brigitte. She called the Véronique. After she called Brigitte. It's so weird.
Also said that he's not in a real relationship, but he lives with a woman. Okay, Véronique says he lives with a woman.
Ah
So,
ouais.
when we jump back into
En plus, il dit qu'il est avec une femme. Et après, il choisit d'être avec un homme. Ah oui, oui. Ah oui, donc c'est important de... Ça, j'avais sauté cette étape. Donc, dans l'interview, il dit bien que je suis avec une femme. Donc, en fait, il disait qu'il était avec une femme. Mais le but, ça serait d'être avec un homme. Donc, il était avec une femme. Donc, il ne se plaisait pas avec sa femme. Et il veut devenir une femme. Ah, ah. Ok. Oh, ok. Il a flingué le pays, oui, économique, finance. Ah oui, quand t'as Jacques Attali derrière, ça se comprend.
Michel Trogneux timeline, we find
Quand t'as ces deux
that
papas qui
this
le violent et qui lui disent qu'il faut faire ça, bah oui. Hein.
Jean-Michel Trogneux, following this interview, marries a woman. And ironically, her name is Véronique. So, could it be possible?
Donc Jean-Michel Trogneux, I've got a woman, Véronique, at the time at the interview and the show. Donc Jean-Michel Trogneux avait une femme qui s'appelait Véronique. Ouh! Donc il se plaisait pas avec sa femme ou c'est quoi? Il voulait devenir une femme. Qu'est-ce qu'il a fait de Véronique Dreux? Jean-Michel married was a woman named Véronique Dreux, only paper evidence of this. Jean-Jacques is born. Et après il a eu un fils, Jean-Jacques. Donc, il a continué à faire sa vie, nana et tout. Donc, voilà, il a marié Véronique. She's married Véronique. And she's got son Tiffany Ozier. Jean-Michel divorce, Véronique Trogneux. Donc, avant, c'était bien. Valmont, je sais pas si c'était là. Avant, c'était bien Jean-Michel Trogneux. Mais entre-temps, voilà, en fait, il a fait l'interview avant. Donc, entre-temps, il se changeait en femme. C'est bizarre. Entre-temps, il se change like the woman at the time, the past. Change like the woman at the time. After, tu as got 3 children. Jean-Jacques Tron. Et c'est pour ça que Jean-Jacques Tron, je sais pas, Jean-Jacques Tron seems like Emmanuel Macron after. I don't know. Jean-Jacques Tron ressemble à Emmanuel Macron. Tiffany Ozier is brown. Donc c'est bien les enfants de Jean-Michel Trogneux qui est devenu Brigitte Macron. Donc c'est bien ses enfants. Mais la femme, c'est Véronique Dreux. Donc c'est pas les enfants de Brigitte Ozier, c'est les enfants de Véronique Dreux. Donc oui, parce que Brigitte Ozier est morte avant. Qui était la sœur, qui était bien Brigitte Trogneux, qui était la sœur de Jean-Michel Trogneux. Mais Jean-Michel Trogneux s'est marié avec une femme, Véronique Dreux, qui a eu 3 enfants. Donc oui, c'est bien ses enfants actuellement. Mais sauf que ses enfants sont courants quand même que c'était un papa et il s'est changé en femme. En fait, elle est là la vérité. So Jean-Michel Trogneux have got a woman, Véronique Dreux, after the time passed. The 3 students knows that Brigitte Macron was Jean-Michel Trogneux. Voilà. But where is Véronique Dreux? Où est Véronique Dreux, les frères? Nana, fact Brigitte works as a Latin professor. Ok. Donc, il a travaillé là-bas. Family photo of the Trogneux clan. Emmanuel Macron is 40 years old when he started in Milan Condor's play. Check son maîtresse or check on his master. Putain.
That John Michel took on the name of a dear friend named Véronique, who he was living with, and who he then moved to marry. We don't know because, of course, there are no pictures.
Ouais, mais elle est passée où, Véronique Dreux? Elle est où, Véronique Dreux? Oui, en fait, non. Voilà, qui est la maman, c'est Véronique Dreux. La maman, c'est Véronique Dreux. Je sais pas si tu as suivi. Parce qu'en fait, là, elle dit bien, en 80, Jean-Michel Trogneux s'est marié. En fait, Jean-Michel Trogneux, Brigitte Macron, c'est Jean-Michel Trogneux. Mais sauf qu'il s'est changé en femme. Et à l'époque, c'était quand il a donné l'interview en 67, c'est vrai qu'il commençait à devenir une femme. Mais, je sais pas, c'est pas encore coïncide. Parce que t'as une interview en 77 et en 80, il donne la date en 80 qu'il a épousé une femme, qu'il était encore un homme. Donc, c'est bizarre, il y a un truc qui coïncide. L'interview en 77 et le fait en 80, il marie une femme. Donc en 77, c'était pas lui. Et il dit Véronique Dreux. Parce que dans les années 80, il épouse Véronique Dreux, à qui il a 3 enfants et ces 3 enfants existent. Tiffany Macron, Tiffany Trogneux, tout ça. Voilà. Donc les enfants sont là, hein, les enfants sont toujours là. Voilà, les enfants sont toujours là. Mais en 67, il y avait une interview d'une femme, Véronique Dreux. C'est Véronique Dreux qui se renvoie, ça ne peut pas être Véronique Dreux parce que Véronique Dreux était une femme. Donc en fait, c'est les dates qui ne coïncident pas en fait. Bon, en tout cas, dans ce qu'il dit, Brigitte était le père, oui. Ouais, c'est ça, exactement. C'est bizarre, hein?
There's nothing there. Jean-Michel Trogneux, on paper, gets married to a woman named Véronique Dreux, okay? And then they have a child. They have a child in 1982 named Jean-Jacques. That's the Jean-Jacques that looks tremendously like Emmanuel Macron. And then shortly thereafter, in 1987, Jean-Michel divorces Véronique Dreux. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Seriously, just like what is going on
C'est clair.
In this story?
What
is happening?
On the date, not I've got conciliity. I've gone conciliate. They are not considered. Yes, il faut retrouver Véronique. Ouais, c'est what is going on? I don't know.
Have these actors who are unable to produce images from these very relevant things that happened in their lives. You know, where is Jean-Michel Trogneux? You got married to a woman. Are there no pictures from your wedding day? No, you decided to just fall off a cliff.
Et en 77, il y a une interview de Véronique Dreux. C'était Véronique Dreux ou c'était pas Véronique Dreux? Il y a un truc avec les dates qui va pas. Il y a un truc. Donc, soit il faut retrouver Véronique Dreux ou alors Véronique Dreux, je sais pas ce qui est arrivé à Véronique Dreux. Je sais pas.
At the same moment that Brigitte Macron, the professor, the teacher, was born, suddenly like no more photographs for you. What is going on here? Why do we have a situation in which schools, which are legally required to release photos, I believe the law in France is after 50 years, any person can get any photo of somebody that is in school, right? You can release the yearbook photos. Why are they refusing to release photos of who was supposed to be the first lady in elementary school and in middle school and in college? Why can't we get these photos? Why are people having to go through court and be gaslit to get these photos? If it's really you, Brigitte Macron, and you didn't take on the identity of your sister,
on peut se dire.
Attends, il y a une pub là.
Amel, si tu as fait 39 biens immobiliers, c'était.
Faudrait regarder sur. On dirait une série Netflix. Au moins, ça fait parler de la France. Ouais, tu retrouves et tu me diras au prochain live, tu me diras, mais c'est trop bizarre. Les dates coïncident pas. Et puis en 77, t'as une Véronique qui se fait interviewer, mais une Véronique transformée. Donc ça peut pas être Véronique Dreux. C'est bizarre. Et puis il a divorcé de Véronique Dreux.
Why are you struggling to answer basic questions?
Trop de
Forget the
mensonges.
conspiracies. Why are you refusing to answer basic questions while trying to push people to sue for defamation, waiting for people to make mistakes? Why not just clarify, are you the same person pictured in this wedding photo? Are you Brigitte Trogneux? How much more basic of a question could I have asked you other than, did you, Brigitte Macron, give physical birth to
Ah oui, les enfants sont là. Hein.
children? Okay? Do not
Mais
allow
tu sais, même les enfants savent que leur papa est une femme aujourd'hui. Et savent que Brigitte Macron est leur père. Les enfants savent que Brigitte Macron est leur père. Ou alors on leur a caché. Je sais pas. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Je sais pas. Brigitte Macron est un mec qui s'est transformé en femme. C'est comme l'histoire des Kardashians. C'est comme... This like a Kardashian story. Bruce Jenner transformed at Caitlyn Jenner. It is the same story.
The media to gaslight you into thinking that you are asking of something that is just such an invasion of privacy. It is completely nutty, okay? We are beyond lunacy when we are talking about such basic questions that could have put this all to bed a long time ago, and we are like 8 years in to them instead preferring to legally try to punk people, to scare people, to intimidate.
Ah oui, c'est sûr, ils vont faire une story Netflix, mais ça, c'est un réalisateur. Je sais pas qui va faire le film Netflix, je sais pas. Mais ça, la personne qui va faire un film sur Netflix, ça va être l'une des meilleurs films du box-office de l'histoire. Ça, c'est... Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé avec... Je sais pas qu'est-ce qui s'est passé entre... En fait, il faudrait voir ce qui s'est passé entre 77 et 80. Donc ça, il faudrait voir au prochain live. Je sais pas.
Sending out thugs, potentially, okay? And when we look at that nebula, when we look at the surrounding and the supporting cast of Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron, do you feel comfortable with
Je
what's
suis
going
le
on?
fils caché de Brie et de Winnie l'ourson. Ouais, c'est ça, c'est incroyable, c'est incroyable. Sa vidéo, elle a fait 52 mois, la mienne, elle fait... c'est incroyable. Bah oui, c'est trop ça.
Is it every day that you need to have someone who forges documents around you? Allegedly, Mimi Marchand, she's still facing trial right now. Someone who's been involved extensively in extortion, who's facing trial right now for extortion. Is it normal to just keep having these sort of gang-type members around you, people that can control images, that can edit images and put it in the press? Like, are we going to accept as the public that this is completely normal, that they just keep landing into these pedophile scandals? Or are we going to recognize that something very sinister is going on? Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron are not presenting themselves as who they say they are, as what they say they are. I believe they were groomed for this position. I believe especially Emmanuel Macron, without question, was groomed by Brigitte. There's no question about that. The only question that remains is who the hell is Brigitte Macron? And the obvious answer to me, and after you see these photos, that...
Ils sont quand même forts, Valmont, tu te rends compte, tu prends un gamin de 14 ans. l'apprends vite, tu l'enseignes à la pédophilie. Tu le violes, tu le violes, tu le violes. Je sais pas qu'est-ce qui est passé à Macron. Ils ont fait un deal, je sais pas, on va mettre tes parents bien, je sais pas. Mais tu m'épouses moi, comme ça tu vas devenir président, tu rêves d'être président, regarde. Voilà, puis comme ça je serai ta femme, je vais me transformer en femme, tu verras. Ça doit être un truc dingue qui s'est passé, un truc de malsain, hein, tu vois. I don't know, because maybe I don't know if Jean-Michel Trogneux was paid Macron at when he was a teenager. She raped him. I don't know. She helped him during the seance, and he said him, "Yes, I want to learn you. You want to become president. When you will become president? I don't know. I want to. I don't know. I want to teach you how to become a president. How to how to go to enter the for Mason. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. For logique maçonnique, I don't know. Franchement, cette histoire, ça me donne la chair de poule. C'est passé crème avec un gamin de 15 ans. Parce que c'est entre riches et les riches ont le monde. Donc, personne normale, non. Donc, je pense comme déjà il faisait partie d'une famille riche, il avait dit depuis tout petit qu'il voulait président, donc on l'a lancé. Mais on l'a violé plusieurs fois. Il fallait qu'il paye le prix, il fallait qu'il se mette avec Jean-Michel Trogneux. Je pense que Jean-Michel Trogneux l'a pris sous son aile. Parce que je pense que Jean-Michel Trogneux, dans l'arbre généalogique, c'est le frère de Brigitte Trogneux qui est morte. Je pense qu'à un moment donné, je pense que Jean-Michel Trogneux s'est mis avec Osier. Mais c'est pas avec Osier. Il s'est mis avec Dreux, genre. Voilà, il s'est mis avec Dreux, il a divorcé et tout. C'est chaud. Et il a pris Macron sous son aile, quoi. Donc, il faudrait savoir où Jean-Michel Trogneux avait croisé Emmanuel Macron pour... bizarre.
Trogneux was 18, you're going to fall down like I did when I saw it. It's completely crazy. It's completely crazy. And thankfully for the work of Xavier Poussard, the one thing that helped him not make mistakes was that he was using an AI program, which the World Economic Forum has rated the #1 facial detection software, which allowed him to avoid making mistakes. It's the same program that is used by China, right? Obviously, you know they have in China the social credit system, and everyone's face they have to be able to tell apart, right? Very similar.
Sous son aile. Son aile velue, Burke. Ouais, sous son aile velue. Sous son aile velue, qu'est-ce que tu veux dire? Sous son aile velue, je comprends pas. Mais ouais, non, cette histoire, c'est Burke. C'est Burke, c'est... Tu sais, t'as un tas d'enfants qui veulent percer dans la musique, dans le showbiz, dans la politique, dans le dessin, dans le foot. Il y a pas mal de gens qui veulent percer, donc un adulte, il va prendre et il va dire je te viole, puis comme ça, tu vas devenir célèbre et je vais me faire passer pour ta femme, ton homme, simplement. C'est connu, ça.
And this was ranked as the #1 software to be able to do that.
Et il a appris, petit à petit, Macron a appris à garder le secret. Petit à petit, garder le secret. Et il est venu, ce qu'il voulait, c'était son rêve de devenir président, non?
Something he ran the software, like with the wedding photo. He ran the software and he said, I know this guy looks like this guy.
Ah ouais.
But the percentage on this
T'as vu,
software
même
is
Xavier
saying
Poussard, il a utilisé le logiciel IA pour connaître les vérités.
the cousin and the man are two different people. So he didn't run with that theory. He didn't go just based off of his gut instinct. He also was being aided by a software which was giving him answers before he even really knew what the answers were. We'll have more on that when I sit down with him. But do know that the software he is using has the blessing of the World Economic Forum. And I think we've all figured out that forum is pretty evil. And they want us all to be able to be identified. And the software...
Oui, de Brigitte, autrement dit, de Jean-Michel Trogneux. Parce que Brigitte Osier était morte, donc c'était Jean-Michel Trogneux. Mais pour avoir les réseaux, Jean-Michel Trogneux l'a violée. Il faut dire la vérité, il l'a violée. Et tu passes par moi et tu verras que tu vas devenir ce que tu veux. Tu es un homme, moi je vais devenir une femme pour être avec toi. Ils devaient bien s'entendre, il y avait un feeling qui passait.
It's incredible. I mean, you can take a woman when she's 6 years old. She could have had 20 surgeries in her face to transform her face, and it will still go. That's her 80% chance. I've never seen anything like it. It kind of terrifies me about our future. It terrifies me about AI in general. But for the purposes of his investigation, it really allowed him to sort things, and there's no question upon seeing this technology, in my mind, that Jean-Michel Trogneux is Brigitte Macron. The only question that I have is what happened to his sister, Brigitte Trogneux. And you'll get to that as well. Like I said, I didn't want to give us too many spoilers ahead of the interview, my sit down with him. But there's
Moi,
just
franchement,
more,
ça me dépasse.
there's so much more for us to unpack. The Rothschild connection, the jobs that he got that he didn't deserve, Emmanuel Macron.
Voilà, la connexion à nous faire pour déballer la connexion Rothschild, les emplois qu'il a obtenus et qu'il ne méritait pas. Donc, c'était par Jean-Michel Trogneux. Parce que c'est comme ça, quand tu perces dans le showbiz et tout, il faut qu'on te viole, il faut que tu suces. Lil Wayne, à 11 ans, il a sucé 11 mecs, non? Il avait 11 ans, il a sucé. C'est comme ça, en fait. Pour percer, il faut que tu suces. Et en fait, c'est ça.
Like I said, we will get to all of those things. Before I get into some of your questions.
Et Emmanuel Macron n'a pas d'enfant. Donc, est-ce qu'il s'est sacrifié pour avoir les réseaux de bris pour monter? Et est-ce que son retour était donc tu veux percer, tu vas avoir la gloire, on va te donner, mais tu seras avec moi et en échange, tu n'auras pas d'enfant. Donc lui, il se sacrifie 2 fois, ça veut dire qu'il se marie avec le mec qui l'a monté, il s'est transformé en femme et au retour, il n'aura pas d'enfant. Tu n'auras pas d'enfant, t'inquiète. Bah, on lui a fait ça. Expliquez-moi. I want to say that I said in French because Jean-Michel Trogneux rapped Emmanuel Macron. He gave him glory, and he said, maybe said him, yes, I want to I will give you glory, and at the change, you become a man president, and you don't have a child with a third person, and you stay with me, and I will become your wife, un truc du genre, tu vois. Ouais, bonne journée.
Americans are carrying high credit card balances that charge 20% or more
Oh là
every
là.
month. It is time to take control of your debt. If you're a homeowner and you've been waiting
Voilà.
to figure out.
Donc les gars, je vais Candace Owens fait sa pub, parce qu'elle fait sa pub entre temps. Elle travaille avec des partenaires, ça se comprend. Beaucoup de choses dans cet épisode 4, beaucoup de choses. C'était plus l'épisode 4, c'était plus sur l'arbre généalogique de Brigitte Osière, de Jean-Michel Trogneux. Mais vraiment, vraiment beaucoup. Et surtout la chronologie. Parce qu'il y avait l'arbre généalogique de Jean-Michel Trogneux. Il y avait l'arbre généalogique avec qui les couples Macron travaillent, à savoir Bernard Arnault, Françoise Nogues, qui a aidé les gens transgenres à avoir une identité sociale, voilà, et professionnelle aussi. Il y avait ça, il y avait la chronologie de Jean-Michel Trogneux. À un moment, il donne une interview en 77, il se fait passer pour Véronique Dreux. 3 ans plus tard, il épouse Véronique Dreux. Enfin, il se fait passer pour Véronique, mais 3 ans plus tard, il épouse Véronique Dreux, à qui il a 3 enfants. 4 ans plus tard, il divorce d'elle. Ces enfants sont les enfants de Brigitte Macron d'aujourd'hui. Et à la fin, il se passe beaucoup de choses aussi, parce que on apprend que voilà, il divorce avec elle et tout. Et bon, on arrive à une conclusion que parce que quand il est revenu dans son service en Algérie, il a donné une interview, il se changeait en femme. Donc il se faisait appeler Véronique. 4 ans plus tard, il épouse Véronique Dreux. C'est bizarre, c'est très 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 bizarre. Donc il y a beaucoup de choses à mener dans cette enquête, il y a beaucoup de choses à éclaircir, parce qu'il y a une femme, il divorce, il a 3 enfants, mais entre-temps, il se change en femme. Donc, est-ce qu'il s'est changé en femme au moment de l'émission, mais 4 ans plus tard, il épouse Véronique Dreux, ou alors Véronique Dreux, il l'a épousé avant, et quand il se changeait en femme, dans les années 77, il a divorcé. Mais pourquoi donner la date de 84? Alors, normalement, dans les années 80, il est censé être une femme. C'est trop bizarre. Ou alors, je sais pas, qui était à l'interview en 77? C'est trop bizarre. Bon, je vous laisse. C'est très complexe. C'est fascinant, en même temps très complexe. Et c'est lourd à porter. C'est très, très lourd. Réfléchissez de votre côté. Moi, je vous dis très bon week-end. Et ciao, à la prochaine. Ciao.